Hey everyone, welcome to the Human Project podcast. This episode, we're going to dive into the shape of conversations. Why is this worth doing? One of the things we found is in interpersonal relationships, conversations tend to be really perfunctory, and it's typically just one person sharing information without folks exploring options together and picking how they want to go about doing something different. What we're going to dive into with this episode is a tool that Mark and I found called the shape of conversations. We're going to dive into each step, talk about some ways that you can start to implement this. We're going to talk about some pitfalls to avoid, and we'll talk about the overall benefit that we've seen from being able to put this into practice. So listen in for some things on how you can improve your collaborative conversations. Hey Mark.
Hey Chris.
How's it going?
It is good today. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We've been able to talk about some things, and I'm excited for this next conversation because it's about conversations.
Conversation about conversations, like meta?
Yeah, meta, like Facebook.
No, not that. No,
It was so much more fun to say it before Facebook had their name.
I
Yeah.
agree. They stole it.
What we're here to talk about today is conversations and how we handle different types of conversations. In particular, ones where we have to be collaborative to figure out what's the outcome we're going for.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of fun. And
Can be.
Yeah. When you know how to do them, they can be a lot of fun, and we know how to do them.
Yeah.
So they're fun.
It turns out this is one of those things like they're actual skills
Yeah.
and some awareness that can help with these. And I just think it's the kind of thing that we assume that you just do. Just like you show up and magically there's a collaboration that happens. And that's
Only
simply
that
not
easy.
the case. So I'm curious for you, where are some of the situations that you've found collaborative conversations are most important?
Team meetings. Any conversation you have with a team where you're trying to figure out, like, what's a new way we want to work? What's a new way of operating? What's this new process, tool, anything like that we want to have in place? So many meetings are perfunctory. There you go. There's that favorite word.
Okay.
Meaning doesn't achieve the value that it's intended to achieve.
You open up the dictionary. Thank
Yeah, there you go. I don't know why opening a dictionary.
Because you like books. That's why.
I do like books. But the reason so many meetings are perfunctory is people treat them as one-way sharing of information.
Mm.
And in order to get buy-in, in order to get better creativity, in order to get just more effective outcomes, we need to collaborate and work together.
Yeah.
And collaborate's a funny word because I've heard some people think of it as like, it means you listen to me talk. That's not collaboration.
No.
That is information sharing
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
telling. But
Yeah.
collaboration is, let's work together and bring our different perspectives, our different skill sets to figure out what's the best path forward.
So when I hear the word collaborate, I hear co and labor right inside of it. Like we're going to work together to get somewhere, right? Not just declare something to be true or show up with an idea and everybody give it a thumbs up. Yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do it. But we need to wrestle with something in order to get where we're trying to go together.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good way of looking at it. And I think that way applies not just in the business setting like I talked about, but I think it also applies personally too. Like I think, how many conversations do I have with my spouse that were even like trying to figure out what do we have for dinner? Okay. Nobody told me that the hardest thing about being an adult is figuring out what to eat for 3 meals a day.
Yeah.
But like even that can be a collaborative conversation and not just a, what do you want for dinner? Oh, I don't know. What do you want? And then
Whatever
you suggest something and they don't want it. Yeah. Victoria's normally pretty easygoing, but
it happens.
Yeah. But even conversations with like our loved ones, with our friends, with our family, they can all be collaborative conversations because it's not just information sharing.
Yeah.
Like that's not really what effective relationships just do, is just share information one way.
Yeah.
It's figure things out together, and like shoulder to shoulder is a good way I've heard it described. It's like we're working together to do something.
Yeah.
So collaborative conversations can work really well for those as well.
Right. It's really part of relationship when you get down to it. So for us to not just have a perfunctory relationship, not just have a mechanical relationship, we're going to need to collaborate on some things at some level. And there's varying degrees of that. But I think it's worth exploring. And that's why we're talking about it, how we can go about doing that. Because without it, we're not going to have the richness of our conversations, of our relationships, and of our results if we're in a business environment, especially.
Yeah. You and I love talking about anything and everything.
Yeah.
And I believe this came up as a topic of conversation. We were thinking more meta-ly, if that's a word. Meta-ly?
Sure.
Not meta-ly.
I don't know. Open that dictionary and see if you find it in there.
Meta-ly. In a more meta fashion. Aha!
Okay, good. It's good.
A more meta fashion. We were thinking about what do really good conversations that are collaborative in nature have in common? And we came up with this thing called the shape of conversations, which it's a riff off of stuff that's been done, like any good thing in the past. Like there's always tweaks and changes you can make to it. So obviously we don't own this idea, but it's stuff that's out there that's helpful. And it was super simplistic that I think it was really helpful for us, especially as we're collaborating together constantly, to visualize and have some clarity around where we're at in the process. So that way we can know what's next or what is it we're trying to accomplish in this part.
It's like deceptively simple.
Yeah, it really is. Do you want to introduce it?
Sure. Yeah. So the pattern, I guess that's the way I would look at it, is a very simple pattern that collaborative conversations tend to have. And there's 4 steps to it. And this is overly simplistic in its description and yet is super helpful at the same time. I love those kind of models. The first part of it is context. Like, what is it we're here to talk about, or where are we trying to get? What's the purpose that we think, as of where we're standing right now, that we think we're trying to get toward?
Yeah.
So just aligning on that, because you discover if you don't align on that, the rest of this isn't going to work.
You keep spinning in circles if you're not clear on that. I like to answer the question, what problem are we trying to solve?
Yeah. What would it look like if we succeeded at this? That's really the core of this context section.
There you go.
Without that foundation, the rest of this ends up being perfunctory. Even if we try and do the mechanics of it, we end up not succeeding at much.
We've established context. We know where we're going. Now we want to talk, what are some ways that we can get there? And this is diverge.
Yeah.
Diverge. So context, divergence. So we start going up the plane and widening our options. And while we're doing this, we're talking what's possible for us to achieve this goal. And this is kind of a no bad ideas scenario. We want to get as many ideas as possible and see what's available, see what options we have out there.
Yeah, kind of a brainstorming is kind of a quintessential perspective on that most of us have some sort of touchstone with.
Yeah.
And so once we've explored things in that phase, then if we keep exploring, we're never going to get anywhere. So we also need to then make the shift to the next stage, which is converge, which is start to narrow some of those down. So we've broadened our options. We have a bunch of possible things we could do. We need to start heading toward, well, what are we going to do about it? And that's where you start to narrow some things down, maybe eliminate some options, combine some things. Really, you can get creative in that spot, but we need to narrow it down or we're not going to be able to do something about it. We just have a bunch of really interesting ideas. So that's the converge phase.
Nice. Awesome. And then the last phase is action phase.
Yeah.
So we've talked context, we've identified what we're here to solve, we've diverged, come up with a whole bunch of different ideas, we've prioritized, eliminated, picked an option or options, and what we want to do is say, what are we going to do about it? What's the follow-up? What's the step? What's the action that we're going to take?
Right. So again, none of that is like mind-blowing. I'm pretty sure nobody listening to this is going, whoa!
Yeah.
And yet, knowing that and seeing it happen or not happen in collaborative conversations, so important, right?
Yeah.
To be able to be aware of that and then to guide yourself and help guide other people through that really magnifies collaborative conversations significantly.
Yeah, absolutely. Just having those 4 steps of context, divergence, convergence, action.
Yeah.
Just what we've found really helpful just working together is as we start, because I am a natural diverger.
Yeah.
You are a natural converger.
Yeah.
And so it's always like, I'll still be thinking of ideas and you're like, okay, wait, hold on. Are we still in the diverge phase here?
Yeah.
And just having some clarity around that, or I'm like, oh, okay, were you wanting to converge is helpful.
Yeah. The common language is so critical for us to be able to collaborate well together and make space for each other and get where we need to go together.
Yeah. So that's the high level theoretical side of it. What does this look like in practice in a business setting or in a personal setting?
Yeah.
I think let's start off with a really easy, common one, since food is on the brain and I'm hungry.
Always.
Like this is always such a difficult conversation, whether it's with your spouse, whether it's with your friends, whether it's a group at work trying to figure out where to go for lunch.
Yeah.
Like you have an example that you like
Sure.
to talk about with your family.
Yeah, it's even like, for us it's after church with the family, and we're like, okay, so service has gone till, afternoon. So it's 12:30 or something. We're like pretty hungry. We're in the van. We're like, where do we want to go for lunch? And none of us really want to have the conversation because we're actually really hungry.
Yeah, right.
But we all want the food. So we've had to find ways to make this happen. So in this particular case, that conversation, context is pretty fast. And it can be
We
many.
need sustenance.
We all want to eat lunch, right? I mean, you almost don't need to say it in that one scenario, but yes, we all want to eat lunch. Great. All right, it's wonderful. But you can also even set some of those goals. Like, okay, so we all want to eat lunch and we want mom to be able to eat gluten-free. Right. And I would prefer that we have some sort of place that has dessert in it, so you can start to, shockingly, I like sugar, right. But that's still context of what things we want to get out of this. So that's important to set up front. And then you can start to do it. What are some of the options where we could go? We go to Taco Bell. We could go to the Mexican restaurant down the street. You could go to Thai food.
Hold on a second here. Taco Bell was your first option that got brought up?
I didn't say it was mine. I have teenage sons. Okay. Of course, it's in the conversation.
Clarity given.
We'll loop back to Taco Bell in a moment. So then as a family, we can start to narrow things down. One of our favorite techniques is just everybody gets a veto.
Okay.
So, all right, so I don't want the Mexican restaurant today. We just had Mexican 2 days ago, right? Or, oh my gosh, I don't think I can stare at another, dessert and not eat it. So let's, whatever it might be. And so we're narrowing options down so that we can actually come to the spot of saying, okay, so while, you didn't really want this, but this is good enough for you, right? Then, okay, so let's go have lunch here.
Nice.
Is that everybody good with that? So that's the 4 phases in a brief version of a relatively simple conversation.
So let's talk about why that's so effective. One of the reasons I think we start to build up in interpersonal relationships, things like animosity, is we're given an answer for things without being invited into a collaborative conversation. So even an example of like, where do we go for lunch? If one person's being the person that's always deciding, granted, you're gonna have some people that like the person always being the decider.
Sure.
But even just the invitation in to the conversation helps build trust, helps build unity, all of those things that we like to talk about.
Yes.
Especially in a business setting, not just given, here's the answer, here's the solution, go do it. But given some opportunities to think about what possibilities exist, and then together we pick them and figure out the action. Granted, there's going to be some veto and some boundaries and some accountability that comes into play. But just a simple example like that, it's helpful to see what does that look like in practice.
I hear you referencing, I think, like the relational aspect, the connection aspect of this.
Shocking
right?
that that's something we talk about.
No.
Yeah.
But even in a business context where we might go, this decision is simple, I can just make it. At least have the trade-off thought process of the connection and the relationship aspect of it, because those are things that you need in order to have the more challenging and critical collaborative conversations as well. You don't just suddenly go like, okay, turn that switch on, we're all able to do it now.
Right.
No, try and figure out how to have lunch together first.
Yeah. I think something that would be helpful for us, thanks for the example, I think that was good, is diving into each one of them in a little bit more in depth with an example of how could we do this in practice?
Yeah.
How can we do this in practice?
Take it from theory into skill or practical.
As well as what dangers or challenges do we face?
There are none. Okay. No.
Easy peasy. Go do it. You got it.
Sure. We start with context then.
Yeah, let's start with context.
Because I already mentioned the big danger of context is skipping it.
Yeah.
We often just skip right past it and assume that the picture that we have in our heads of what we want is there, and everybody doesn't share it. And then again, we're going to waste time in the divergence, or even usually it's convergence.
Yeah.
And we're trying to converge and we suddenly realize we're converging toward different things.
Yeah.
So don't waste your time. Just be explicit up front. And there's some very simple, no nonsense ways to do that. If it's a session, a meeting you're going to have, send out as what you think it might be ahead of time. It's called agenda or topics or whatever it might be.
You'd be surprised how many
So
people
simple.
don't do that. I'll get calendar invites and I'm like, what's the purpose of this?
Oh, you got the subject line, which sometimes doesn't even help you.
Right. Yeah. Or it's like the last thread of an email. And you're like, there's so much that's covered in here. What are we even talking about?
Yeah.
So just takes 10 seconds to think of what's the goal of this meeting? what's the outcome we're hoping to have?
And I would say if you're in a conference room together and you got a whiteboard, write it on the whiteboard. Or if you're just share a screen or whatever and just type it up just so you can look at it and inspect it together. Yeah. Is this is why I think we're here? Is this why we're actually here? What we're trying to get to? It doesn't have to be crazy. Just something that simple. Really helpful.
Interpersonal setting, like friend, family, relationship, etc. Like, hey, wanted to talk about this because of this.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Right.
Or, hey, here's the challenge that I'm seeing. Here's it according to my perspective. What's the outcome we want to have?
Yeah. It sounds stilted might sound stilted as we're sitting here talking about it. And yet when people have done that with me, I have found it felt very respectful and very relational to me. When someone says like, because I care about our relationship so much, I would like to talk about this. Can we talk about that? Or, hey, I'd like to work with you on this. Can we work on that? I think this is the direction we need to go. Would you want to step into this with me? And I'm like, oh, nice.
I think where it's helpful is it helps you be able to focus. And of all the things we could be talking about, let's constrain our energy and our narrative here, both business setting or interpersonal.
Shockingly, Chris talks about focus. I agree.
All right, so context. So that's a helpful tool for doing that. State it on the whiteboard, send it out ahead of time. Divergence. Mm-hmm. I think this is one that I really enjoy.
Your face just completely lit up, man.
Mainly because one of my favorite tools is using Post-it notes.
And markers.
And markers,
Woo-hoo!
Yes. But I think it's a big reason why we as Agile practitioners, people that are into agility and Scrum and training, love Post-it notes. Is there's something that's there about helping reduce the barrier of people contributing. Mm-hmm. They can write something on a Post-it note, can get crumbled up, thrown away, replaced, whatever. But it gets them off of the blank page and being able to think and put something down without judgment of others. And so divergence is all about what's the possibilities that we could have.
Yes.
So Post-it notes, awesome tool. So I'm not sure what others you got. I got a couple.
Well, I'll just reference back to a previous conversation we had about psychological safety would come into play here.
Sure.
So Post-it note is a technique that can be used in order to enable people to step in. They don't actually have to say those words, even they can write it down just as an example. So just referencing back to that. I also like it because it balances introverts and extroverts.
Oh, sure.
An extrovert typically is not going to have any problem. You can put them in a room of 100 and say any ideas for this, and your more extreme extroverts won't even think twice about it. They're speaking up.
Yeah.
Right? Put an extreme introvert in a room with one other person and say any ideas you've got about it, and they're probably not going to get anything out of them.
Yeah.
But when you use techniques that are intentionally trying to level the playing field, like sticky note, write it down first, as I like to say, the extrovert can hold their breath long enough to not say something, but write something down, and the introvert has a chance to think through what they're going to say before they offer it, which is tremendously helpful. Yeah. Can't not mention liberating structures either in here too. I mean, 1, 2, 4, all.
Oh, there you
is
go.
just the quintessential, beautiful, divergent, and actually has a little converging in it too, we'll get to, but it's a wonderful divergent practice and exercise you can use that is so simple and gives everybody a chance to have their voice heard within a room, even as large as hundreds of people.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, 1, 2, 4, all is you start off with asking a question, giving an invitation. The 1 is people writing it down on their own on a Post-it note. Yep, 1 minute. I think time can vary a little bit, but 1 minute. Write something down on a Post-it note. The 2 is it 2 minutes then?
Yeah.
I always change.
Classically, it's 2 minutes, but really, you also have 2 people, so you can do either of those.
But it's pairing up with somebody else and sharing your ideas, which helps those introverts get off the blank page by writing something down and being able to share it. And then the 4 is 2 pairs get together, which should be 4.
If you're good at math.
If you're good at math. And then they look for themes and patterns that they can be able to share more broadly.
Mm-hmm. And then that's the all. So you can hear from everybody in the room little tidbits of what were the themes of all of that. So it's a really wonderful, simple technique. Yeah,
and we've done this with groups of up to 100 people.
Yeah.
We've done this with groups of 8.
Yep.
Where it's 1, 2, 4, all 8. Or 1, 2, 4, 8.
1, 2, 4, 8. Do the math again.
Yeah. 1, 2, 4, all 8. Yeah, whatever.
Okay, great. I think that's an awesome overview of divergence. What about convergence when we're trying to figure out what do we do with these options?
So let's talk 35 for a second. It's a really specific structure But again, from a prioritization perspective, it can help you kind of get a crowdsourced view of what people are thinking about. So everybody has an idea in their hands. It doesn't have to be one they came up with, but whatever. Every person in the conversation has that idea, and then they pair up with one other person. And they divide between them 7 points. Whole numbers only.
Okay.
In other words, you can't have ties. Like that's,
it'd be 4-3.
4-3 is the closest you're going to get, and one of them's going to get one more point than the other. It can go all the way from 0-7, 1-6, etc., all the way to 4-3.
Okay.
And so you just talk through the ideas for just a few minutes. You're trying to get a quick read on it, not a deep analysis of, and you have to make the invitation clear. What are we trying to decide on here? Do we do this option, whatever it might be? But then you vote, and then you swap cards, and you pair up with somebody else, and you do that 5 times.
So is that why it's called 35? You do it 5 times, and the max you can get is 7 points each time. So like a really good idea is going to get 35 points?
Sure. That
Fast
sounds about
idea.
right. I'm really stinking math. No, what is 7 times 5? That is?
7 times 5 is 35.
Then that's the answer, yes.
Yeah.
That's how bad I am at math. If anybody thinks I'm joking, that's how serious I am. I have no idea.
Huh. Interesting. Learn something new about people you work with every day.
That bad at math. Yes, that's why it's called 35.
Okay.
So you do 5 rounds. Most anything's going to get is 35.
Okay.
And the least something's going to get is 0. So after you do that enough times and you add up the numbers that are written on it, then you just have an idea. People can line up, or the ideas line up, so to speak, and you see the ones that get the most votes. It's a way of narrowing it down. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to decide that the top vote getter is the one to go with, like you said. But you certainly can, say, all right, so it's the top third we want to narrow down, or it gets you a richer conversation. Why do we think these are the ones that have more votes on them? And people can express those things, and it helps you have a better conversation about narrowing down your options.
Yeah, I've enjoyed using that in the past. It works really well when you have a good amount of people. Mm-hmm. Like I think you need like 12 or 14 or something like that to make it really effective. Like you talked about before, the veto option in the fast food one's always a really good one of like, okay, that just will not work for me, especially interpersonally when you're talking just 2 people doing something. Really impactful, really powerful to do that. Another one that I like to use is there's so many prioritization methods that are out there, and product owners and people in general can just get lost with all of those. Last one I'll talk about, because I think this is where people have a lot of challenges. And so it's good to give them multiple options. Something that works well is a matrix of 2 axes. One is like the cost to do it, one is the value to do it, whatever you want your axes to be. And then you place those things on there to be able to see what ideas are the most realistic for the cost and the price that we're paying. And then you can start to group things and figure things out from there.
It's a lightweight analysis, essentially, of 2 of the most critical factors.
Yeah.
If you're doing that in a crowdsourced way, then it helps you narrow things down.
Yeah, which is the goal, is when we do collaborative conversations, we do this shape, we want to have an understanding of what it is we're doing. We want to come up with multiple options, because hopefully we come up with something that would be better than just us deciding by ourselves.
Right.
And we get people bought into it and able to give their perspectives, their blind spots, help us see our blind spots. And then we get to the important part, which is action.
Yeah. Without action, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
So we're going to head in a certain direction. So we want to be really clear about what it is we're going to do about this. And we see this with teams a lot of times, where the team has done all this work, right? And it takes effort to get there. It's co-labor to collaborate. Get to the end, you're like, whew, we decided this. And after we've been through it enough times, we realize a lot of times what they've ended up with is a wish. Or a hope, or a dream. Which is...
Hope is not a strategy.
It's not a strategy. And we've seen it often enough. I mean, I've done it often enough myself that I realize that if that's all we leave with, it's not actually going to happen.
Yeah.
We're going to have better quality. No, you're not. Right. No, you're not. I'm sorry. Right. If that is your whole statement, then you're not going to have better quality. How are you going to? Who's going to do what? When are they going to do it? Those are the types of things that are worth talking about.
Or interpersonally, let's have better communication.
Right.
Yeah, this would actually be a great thing to take through the shape of a conversation is what does it look like to have better conversation? What are some ways we could do that? And then prioritize and figure out what's real, and then make it actionable instead of just
so we can meta our meta conversation by having a conversation about having better conversations using the shape of conversations.
Who are you?
That sounds fun.
I'm not saying us.
Oh, okay. Darn.
I'm saying like, because I think you hear friends or couples say that a lot. Let's have better communication.
Yeah.
And that's setting yourself up for failure because you don't have any way of saying, what does this actually look like?
Or why, or any of those things. So
right.
all the parts of the shape of this conversation would be critical on that, to the point where you're at the end saying, so here's one or two things that we are deciding that we're going to do about that.
Yeah.
And we're going to try these things together. So that's our shared commitment.
Yeah.
And that's the good result of collaboration, is where you want that to be. Another great benefit from a team, by the way, is that if you've done this well as a collaboration, you have shared ownership at the end, which greatly increases the likelihood that people are actually going to follow through, that you're actually going to do the thing, or try it at least.
Yeah, that way it's not somebody else's, this is what you're going to do. It's something we've decided collectively, so therefore it's our plan to implement.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So what are some techniques you've seen for this action phase that help get those really powerful actions?
Yeah, I think, like you said, answering the questions of what will this look like, how will we know, how will we be able to come back and do it? Experimental language is a big one.
Yeah.
I think when we set actions, it's easy for us to think that they're set in stone and set forever. Like, this is the law, you will now do this action. I don't know why I went medieval there.
I'm not sure.
But thinking in those terms often makes it difficult to actually say, yeah, this is the action we want to take.
Right.
If we say, hey, let's try this for a week, for a couple weeks, however long, whether that's interpersonally or in the business space, and then how will we know we're successful? Is this working for us? Yeah. That can be an extremely valuable tool to, one, increase ownership, and then two, set yourself up for an inspection cycle to say, is this actually something that's worth it? And maybe we need to have another collaborative conversation, if not.
That's it. Kind of a humble spot to be in, too, to say, it's almost like saying, we don't know for sure this is going to work, because you don't, by the way.
Right.
Well, let's revisit in 2 weeks or whatever it might be and see how it's going and choose adaptations.
Yeah.
And that really lowers the barrier of picking something. You're not picking it, like you said, forever. It's just for 2 weeks.
Bingo.
I think a really critical aspect here is to find a way to have the conversation about, are we actually committing to doing this?
Okay.
Now, the word commitment might be a real challenge, but some techniques that can at least help with that. The Roman thumb vote, as some people might call it. I can give a thumbs up, I'm on board with that fully, or the thumbs down, which is I can't do that, or the sideways thumb, which is I have reservations. It's a really simple voting method, as long as you are careful not to punish people who are giving an answer you'd rather they not give.
Something about psychological safety here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As long as you are all doing your best to create the environment where it's safe for people to step in. Yeah.
Psychological
then this
safety.
Type of thing with the thumb vote is super helpful.
Yeah. That way it gives folks an opportunity to kind of do the veto, last responsible moment.
Right.
Or you could talk fist of 5, which is more on a gradient level.
Right.
Like 5 is I agree, 1 is I disagree, and levels in between.
Yeah. The richness of those conversations, though, is when somebody actually says, I'm not sure about that. Yeah. And then you ask the why question exactly. Yeah. Because you want those reservations now not hidden and not discovered later when you're trying to do the things. Let's talk about it now. And again, you might have to revisit some diverge, converge in order to address that, and you'd rather do it now, even though you probably just want to get to the action finish stage.
Yeah. That's, I think, the danger with the action phase is like falsely committing to an action or like false yes. I think I've said that in every video we've done is a false yes. But saying you're going to do something and then having no intention to do it. Right. So it gives people an opportunity to kind of not opt out, but provide input so that way you can go back through the conversation if necessary. So context, diverge, converge, action.
Yes.
That's the shape of a conversation.
So with that really simple paradigm, what is it that makes it so valuable?
I think there's a couple pieces. What I've seen work really well in the past is a shared common language. I think you mentioned that. Yeah. Common language, so that way we know where we're at with, like we talked about, are we in divergence? Are we in convergence? What's our context again? Are we in the action phase? Are we ready to commit to this? Like just having clarity around that can help folks know what's the best style I should participate in. Like you said, business setting, personal setting, it's helpful there. I think also awareness, like, hey, this is the intentional shape I want us to do with this conversation. Like folks can have space to think. And like you said, psychological safety, ability to bring folks in, contribute new ideas. And then Yeah, just getting to that spot where you have action, ownership, buy-in. I think it's incredibly powerful.
Yeah. Because, as we said at the beginning, putting people in a room and saying, let's collaborate, doesn't actually make collaboration happen.
Right.
We want the results of it. This is a really simple structure that helps us get there.
Yeah, and how to create space for it. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
Excellent.
Sweet.
Great.
Awesome. Thanks all for listening. If you want to have us help you have more effective collaborative conversations, let us know.
Hey, thanks for tuning in today. Behind the microphones, we've got me, Mark Wavle, Chris Conlin, and our lead editor, Derek Donley. We're a crowd-funded nonprofit, and most of what we do is free because of your generous support. So thank you for joining us in our mission to bring 1 million lives closer to the fullness of God's design. To support us financially or to learn more, visit us at humanproject.us. See you next time.